Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. Furry enjoyers rejoice. In version 1.6, we are all getting the new A-rank agent Pulchra completely for free. She's an interesting character that actually brings a couple new mechanics to the game. In this video, you'll learn everything you need to know about Pulchra, and before you start draining your precious battery charge, you'll want to watch this to see whether she's perfect for you or if she'll leave you feline disappointed. Hoyoverse went all out on her the furrier aspects of her design, as we are now suffering from stage 2 furry-citis. Patients may find themselves instinctively saying ooh-woo in casual conversations and experience an uncontrollable urge to commission digital art, but fortunately we haven't progressed to stage 3 yet. Anyway, Pulchra is a physical stun class agent who specializes in aftershock damage, off-field daze application, and providing quick assists. This video was filmed on the early access server and is not indicative of the final product. There may be some changes on release, so be sure to check the comments down below to see if there are any. As usual, we'll go through her kit, her best drives and stats, Wengens, teams, Mindscapes, a showcase, and of course my advice on Pulchra at the end of the video. Fortunately, Pulchra has one of the simplest kits out of any new character we've gotten in Zenless Zone Zero. Her basic attacks, dash attacks, and dodge counter are useless. You know they're useless when their descriptions are literally just the box cutter version of descriptions. This saves us a lot of time because we can skip them to talk about her specials. Pulchra's special attack is what defines her. When she enters Hunter Gate state, she'll fill up these little teeth-looking icon near her portrait. Then, when a different character uses their special attack, as long as that special attack is a heavy attack, which almost every special in the game is, the screen will flash with this fire text on your screen, where now Pulchra will perform aftershock attacks. Whenever you hit the enemy after the fire thing appears on your screen, Pulchra will pull out one of her teeth icons to perform her special attack Rending Claw Nightmare Shadow. At Mindscapes 0 to 5, she can do up to 6 off-field attacks, with the last one being just very slightly stronger, because apparently she believes in saving the best for last. These off-field attacks are useful for doing a bit of damage, applying daze while off-field, and also applying a debuff to the enemy called Binding Trap. Binding Trap, which is her additional ability and is activated by simply having an attack or Sons of Caledon character, makes it so when Pulchra hits the enemy with any of this stuff, the enemy will take 30% more aftershock damage for 15 seconds. So yeah, in a way she's like Zenless Zone Zero's first Xingqiu, who performs coordinated attacks while she's off field. Granted, she's not nearly as good as Xingqiu is in his respective game, but hey, neither is 90% of the Genshin roster. Now, how does she enter Hunter's Gate state to fill up those little teeth? By performing an evasive assist with the assist follow-up, by performing her EX special, which needs 60 energy, by using her chain attack, and by using her ultimate. Basically, if it's a button that's not basic attack, dash attack, dodge counter, or regular special, press it and she'll probably enter Hunter's Gate. Also, when any of those aforementioned abilities, assist follow-up, EX special, chain attack, and ultimate, hits an enemy, she'll perform a quick assist to the previous character in your roster. This enables you to frequently quick assist back to your DPS character. And for good measure, Pulchra also gains 30% daze for 6 seconds while in Hunter's Gate state, so you want to quickly activate her off-field attacks after bringing on your DPS character. All in all, Pulchra will provide the following: a decent amount of daze application, a small amount of off-field physical aftershock damage. At M0 to M5, she provides 30% aftershock damage, and at M6, she provides 30% damage bonus. She also provides up to 24% bonus damage via her drive set, and she provides many quick assists throughout the battle. And finally, unlike most other stun agents which hog the field time, she enables your DPS character to take a lot of field time. Now for her rotations, it's pretty simple. Just do any of the aforementioned things, and then quick assist your DPS onto the field. Then use your DPS's special or EX special to activate Pulchra's fire thing on the screen, and then just attack the enemy. Now there are a couple minor things to keep in mind. First is that she will lose her Hunter's Gate state and the teeth charges involved if you swap her back on and don't do one of the things that put her back into Hunter's Gate state, and then just swap her off. So obviously you'll want to avoid doing that. And one last little thing that I believe only applies to a single DPS character at the moment is that in order to activate Pulchra's fire thing, the special or EX special from the DPS character must count as a heavy attack. Off the top of my head, only Evelyn has an awkward special for this, as you need to perform the explosion part of her specials, which is not good for Evelyn. But literally every other DPS character does not have this issue, again off the top of my head. Okay, last thing I promise, and this one is actually quite unfortunate, but Pulchra's evasive assist costs 1 assist point as expected. However, tragically, her assist follow-up also consumes 1 assist point. So unlike most characters who only consume 1 assist point, Pulchra will consume 2. This is still a good option for her to quickly obtain Hunter's Gate and quick swap back to your DPS, but do keep this in mind as you'll drain your assist points twice as fast. Now, a small consolation prize is that if you do have 1 assist point left, you can still perform her evasive assist and assist follow-up. For her talents, level her core, special, and assist. Then level her chain and ultimate, and lastly you can just literally leave her basics and dodge at level 1. Up next we have her drives and stats. Pulchra has a few options, with overall my most recommended set being the 4-piece Astral Voice. Honestly, until you've invested a lot into her damage output just isn't great. So for most teams you'll use Pulchra in. Boosting your DPS's damage via the Astral Voice is both cheaper to farm and preferable, as she's great for maintaining stacks on the Astral Voice due to how frequently she can quick swap your DPS back onto the field. There are, however, a couple sets at least worth talking about, which include the 4-piece Shadow Harmony. This is overall the best set for her personal damage output, providing her 15% aftershock damage and up to 12% crit rate and 12% mega attack. But you can see this number. Not only is it just a few thousand damage more than the Astral Voice, we're talking around 75 to 95,000 damage. And this is for 2 full sets of her Hunter's Gate with an EX special and an assist follow-up, which is well barely any damage. Her damage does improve with Mindscapes though, so we will talk about that later. The last set worth considering in my opinion is the 4-piece Proto-Punk, which can provide some decent uptime on its buff through evasive and defensive assists. But I personally think the Astral Voice is a better choice on Pulchra. For the 2-piece set bonus, most of the time you'll want to run 2-piece Shockstar Disco to stun the enemy faster. You can consider the 2-piece Swing Jazz as well for a bit more energy, or the 2-piece Woodpecker if you want to improve her damage. But personally, I recommend the top row in this chart, which is the 4-piece Astral Voice plus 2-piece Shockstar Disco to improve her buffing and stunning capabilities. For stats, overall I recommend crit rate in slot 4, physical damage in slot 5, and impact percent in slot 6. And for substats, all you can really do with them is to improve her damage a bit, so it's definitely not the top priority to farm good substats for her, but you should go for the usual crit rate, crit damage, and attack percent. Next we have her Wenjins. Overall, I recommend using Pulchra's signature Wenjin, the Box Cutter, eventually whenever you manage to get it, no rush. As of Pulchra's release, the Box Cutter will only be on Soldier Zero Anby's W Engine banner, but it will later be added to the standard pool of Wenjins, where you are very likely to eventually accidentally get it. In other words, I don't recommend pulling on Samby's Wenjin banner just for Pulchra's Box Cutter because honestly, it's a marginal improvement anyway. Fortunately, when it comes to almost all the other stun Wenjins, they perform pretty similarly in terms of their day's output. So while you're waiting for the Box Cutter to come home, you can just use something like the Precious Fossilized Core, the Steam Oven, or even the Hellfire Gears. Also, one more Wenjin worth directly mentioning is Lighter's Wenjin, the Blazing Laurel. So for the 10 of you that have his Wenjin and aren't using it on Lighter, well, it is generally a bit better than even the Box Cutter for her day's output. But yeah, feel free to take a look at this chart and make your own decision based on what's available to you. Up next are Pulchra's Mindscapes. Pulchra's Mindscapes 1 through 5 just add a bit of damage and a bit of daze. They are incredibly unremarkable, which is why we're going to skip them and go straight to her M6. Her M6 is pretty good. Not only does it disturbingly add 2 teeth, which allows her to perform 8 instead of 6 off-field attacks, it also increases the off-field slash damage by 15%, and most importantly, her Binding Trap now increases damage for all damage by 30% instead of just aftershock damage, making her a much more universal character. Pulchra's M6 enables her to buff other teams besides, well, as of her release, just Soldier Zero Ambi. However, unless you're pulling for Soldier Zero Ambi, I personally don't recommend going for her M6 because you will very likely get it over time. Buy Mindscapes 6 with an Upgrade 5 box cutter. She's applying around 33.6% more days and dealing around 90% more damage. At this point, her damage might be considering worth investing a bit into, but it still falls very short of actual DPS characters. For Pulchra's teams, I'd honestly only temporarily recommend one team for her at Mindscape 5 and below, and that is with Soldier Zero Ambi. The final slot can go to any support character like Lucy, Astra, or Caesar. Pulchra's 30% aftershock damage is a very nice buff for Sambi, and Sambi is a great on-field attacker. However, do keep in mind that if you're planning to pull for future potential Sambi teammates, like possibly Trigger, you might be benching Pulchra very quickly. Regardless, this is a great team for Pulchra as of her release. Now for literally every other team besides Sambi, Pulchra isn't as good until she's at Mindscape 6, which provides that 30% bonus damage to all damage types instead of just aftershock damage. But regardless of her Mindscapes, she's a decent choice for Nekomata. Nekomata really appreciates frequent quick assists to maintain her core passive's 60% bonus damage, and Pulchra does just that, giving Nekomata a lot of additional field time to spam her dodge counters and, well, just being a Nekomata. Eventually, when you get Pulchra's Mindscape 6, that's another 30% bonus damage that Pulchra can provide Nekomata. For the third slot, pretty much any strong support like Astra, Nicole, Lucy, and Caesar work well here. Another character who does well on field is Jane, as the more field time Jane has, the more she can assault her enemies. Pulchra, needless to say, enables this, and if you have her Mindscape 6, she's even better for this job. The only issue is that Seth is probably still the better option for Jane, but if you don't like Stage 1 Catboys and instead prefer Stage 2 Furry-citis, then Pulchra is a viable, albeit in my opinion worse, alternative. Other DPS characters that do okay with prolonged field time, even when the enemy isn't stunned, are reasonable choices with Pulchra as well, such as Soldier 11 and even Harumasa. Both of them, while preferring to attack the enemy while they're stunned, can spend additional time on field and still get good value. So I want to start off this showcase with a comparison between Ambi as well as Pulchra, and in this situation it is really interesting because Ambi does stun faster than either a lower invested Pulchra or a higher invested Pulchra, and in comparison to a lower investment Pulchra, this combination of first stunning the enemy and then going for the kill while the enemy is stunned ended up being faster than a lower investment Pulchra. However, once Pulchra is at M6U5, then the kill times ended up being very similar, with the stun window actually only being a couple seconds slower. An interesting comparison here is that because Sambi is able to spend much more time on field, with Pulchra, of course, you make up for the slower stun time by doing some damage to the enemy before you stun the window, which is why the results ended up being, these results. So yeah, I found it pretty interesting that at least at this level of investment, M6U5 Pulchra ended up performing very similarly to M6U5 Ambi. At least for this literally one very rudimentary test, which should be taken with a giant grain of salt. Alright, I've got quite a few runs to run you guys through for Pulchra showcase to kind of demonstrate how she is at lower investments as well as higher investments for Pulchra, and I actually found these results pretty interesting. So starting off, I will include the times from my previous Sambi video, which did have a couple low investment Pulchra runs, as well as, Sambi on the Starlight engine in this case. And the first team is a cheap bike ride, which is a much more free-to-play friendly, accessible team where you're very likely to get a couple copies of Pulchra while you're pulling for Sambi. So, and her M1 and M2 honestly don't really matter at all, especially on this team. But anyway, we can see here that this team ended up clearing at around, I believe, 98 seconds in comparison to the Cunning Hares team, which didn't have Pulchra and which had M6U5 Ambi, which cleared in about 82 seconds. So yeah, this roughly lines up with my earlier testing and experimentation when it came to Ambi versus Pulchra, at least against that single enemy, the Thanatos or whatever it's called. But I do think that this run can definitely be improved. I mean, all these runs can be improved. These are all anecdotal runs, so please take them with a giant grain of salt. Anyway, this next team is the eventually bike ride team, where Pulchra can definitely give you a much better ride in the future when you eventually get her M6 and probably, you know, a few copies of her box cutter. Because yeah, you're very likely to get Pulchra to M6 in the long run, since she is a 4-star character in Zenless Zone Zero. So anyway, despite me getting clobbered a couple of times, this still ended up being a faster run than most of my, well, than all the other runs that I did at M6 U5 Pulchra. So yeah, because, you know, there's a lot of factors that go into it besides just a couple of seconds of me getting walloped. But anyway, we can see here that now this team was able to clear this boss in 85 seconds. So basically a tie with the Cunning Hares team with the M6 U5 Ambi. And this lines up really well with my earlier test as well against the Thanatos in training mode, where I personally found that M6 U5 Ambi and M6 U5 Pulchra, at least in certain levels of investment, ended up performing very, very similarly. Now this next team is cutting back on burgers for Sambi in the situation where Sambi saves some money on eating less burgers, and therefore she's able to afford her signature Wenjin. And in this case, I think that because Pulchra here amplifies Sambi's damage by 30%, all of her damage, and the fact that we don't have to care about stunning the enemy at all in this case, because Sambi now does enough damage where, you know, we can pretty much bypass the stun window and just go straight for the kill. And in this situation, Pulchra definitely feels like the better character for buffing Sambi because of, well, you know, again, you can just skip the entire stun window and duration now. Because yeah, I'm not really sure. I guess I'm just repeating myself. So personally, I find Pulchra, especially at M6, where that 30% bonus damage applies to everything in your DPS's kit, tends to be a bit better as you vertically invest into the main DPS character that you are trying to support. So yeah, this team cleared it in 64 seconds, which is way, way faster than any of the earlier teams. Now, this next example is pretty funny, but it is versus Disputed Node 8-2. Now, okay, this first run isn't that funny, but the next run is a bit more funny. But we are suffering from stage 1 furry-citis with first Nekomata, and she's being accompanied by stage 2 furry-citis character Pulchra. So here we can see that, I don't know, it's probably just me, but I really struggle with Nekomata here. And actually, there's a really interesting drawback with using Pulchra in this fight specifically, because this fight you are heavily rewarded for using defensive assists, because defensive assists apply a ton of days, and unfortunately Pulchra's evasive assist as well as assist follow-up, both, you know, applying less days as well as costing 2 assist points, means that you actually run out of assist points very, very quickly in this specific fight, where instead you could literally spam 6 defensive assists. So I actually found this interesting because this specific fight isn't actually that great for Pulchra. But yeah, anyway, this next team though, however, is actually pretty funny, and it is the Angry Furry team with an M6 U5 Pulchra who is built with DPS, and I'm talking all the DPS stuff, the DPS drives, as well as an attack percent slot 6. And we can see here that in this chain window, let's see how much damage Pulchra did. I don't remember, but it's pretty hefty. Look at that, 187,000 blast from her chain attack, and with this ultimate, oh my goodness, over 500,000 damage to the big guy. And if all 3 hits critted against the small guy, that would have been 750,000 damage nuke, which is actually pretty hilarious if you think about it. But anyway, this fight continues, and unfortunately, after you kind of blast her load with the ultimate and her chain attacks, you know, she doesn't really do as much, although the aftershock damage attacks do a decent amount of damage. But yeah, her chain attacks are doing pretty well against this enemy, and this really kind of goes to prove that, yeah, this is definitely a support zone 0, where if you've got some pretty meta supports like M0U1 Caesar, M0U1 Astro Yao, you are able to dumpster content with, you know, comical builds like this one. So yeah. So all in all, Pulchra is an interesting introduction to off-field and aftershock damage, and her being a free character is a convenient addition to our roster and is helpful for free-to-play players. Admittingly, I'm not confident in saying she's best in slot for any team as of her release, especially at lower Mindscapes. However, being an A-rank agent, we can expect to hopefully eventually get her Mindscape 6. As mentioned earlier, if you plan to use her for Sambi, Pulchra will likely be the first character you replace on Sambi's team. But regardless, she is a decent and usable choice for Sambi, and a reasonable universal A-rank stun agent at Mindscape 6. Let me know how you plan to use or not use Pulchra down in the comments below, and let me know if I missed anything. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Want to Lose, signing out.